That was better. Lines became curves. Curves became shapes. Shapes came to life. Across the floor of the pigsty, I had scattered picture after picture. From the moment I pulled myself through the small gap, hounded by the taunts and pursuits of my fellow slaves, I had retrieved the charcoal and set to work. I didn't think. I didn't consider. I just drew. As ever, allowing my subconsciousness to take over, to draw what came to my mind first. Soon my journal had a good few new entries. I had struck past last night's picture as fast as I could to add more and see what they would bring. 1 page, 10 minutes work. Wicked slits knife with her eyes gazing from behind. Another page, 5 minutes work. Myself and the card with darkened lines to add the weight. Another page, 3 minutes work. The pit, sketchy and terrible. Page after page, filled with imagery of my time here. Even in my drawings I couldn't escape it. I had wanted a picture of her, before I forgot her face. But it just wouldn't come out. Like a machine in Philly's foundries working to the same pattern, I found my sketching fell into patterns I could not control. Once, a rare slave that actually conversed with me had asked why I never chose what I drew. How could I? Choice was not mine to have by birth. But now I wondered. At the end now, with nothing else to live for, no work to be done anymore, what if I chose to draw something nice? That wondrous hope in the mare's voice as she said that drawing could, in itself, be an escape rung in my mind. I took another page, leafed the parchment over and gripped the dirty charcoal loosely in my mouth. Perhaps if I drew some random lines, then made what I wanted from it, maybe that would work? Trembling, each sweep of the charcoal didn't seem to add anything. How could this ever work? I didn't have the mindset or the belief to ever think for myself. All I was doing was suddenly a surprise to me. I saw something in it. I saw potential. With gusto, my charcoal flew onto the paper. An instinct I barely remembered having kicked in. Artistic form. The shape of the world around me. Specific memories in my head. They brought images to bear. Images like curling up next to my mother. Stealing from my master back on the rock farm. Running away to hide in Philadelphia. Mouthing off under my breath at slit. And sitting aside some pony rifling through my journal without any fear or apprehension. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I drew for myself. I jolted back from the paper, breathing hard, as I dared to let my eyes descend upon what I beheld before me. It was me. Just me. Just that small pony staring back at me from the bottom left of the page, not even filling the space I could have. Like he was waiting on some pony else to fill the gaps beside him with something else. He was smiling. My hoof went to my mouth. When had I last smiled? I honestly couldn't remember. But here it was. My sketch's lips curled upwards in a joyful, playful laugh that I wish I could have heard for real.
Hey, Runt, you ready? They're calling for you. Time to die.
I ignored it. This was more important. I threw the page over and grabbed the charcoal again. Lines into curves, curves into shapes, shapes into...
Life is over, Runt. You can see them coming to chain you all up and drag you there.
Charcoal flew. I drew faster than I ever had before. I was in control of this. Not them. I could control what I drew. The form came to be. The mare. She was looking curious, staring off the page at me, though trying to work out why I had drawn her. I could choose. I could create anything.
Murky number 7, you are ordered to the pit. Come out, be changed, and let's get going so we can all win some caps on you.
The voice of the enclosure master. Oh goddesses, no. I had just learned how to do this, yet I could feel my legs trying to pull myself on conditioned instinct to obey. I tried to reach the paper once again. One more. I could do one more and just be laid out. The charcoal snapped at the tip from how hard I was pressing. The drawing went messy, but it didn't matter. Stains of tears were appearing on it, choking back the feelings stirring within. Even at such a simple, silly thing, I found this moment interrupted. There was a harsh rap of a hoof on the pigsty.
You there, slave. Is Murky number 7 in here? You bet, he's cowering like a...
There was a crunching sound followed by the sound of some pony hitting the ground hard.
I didn't ask for your opinion. Guards, tear this damn thing apart and get him out of here.
Oh, Luna, help me. I felt the sty shake and buckle under their savage hoof blows on either side. The drawing was only just taking shape. I knew what it was. It was... The roof snapped off. Smog and dust seethed in from the outside world as a silhouetted gas mask glared in and spotted me frantically scribbling. I squealed as I felt a second slaver grab my jerkin in his teeth and effortlessly lift me, whining in pain as my bruised ribs protested at the sharp movement. I pulled down with all my meager weight. One more line! The pulling intensified as a second guard joined. No, please! I begged them as I felt the charcoal fall into my mouth. I have to see her! Once more! With a great tug, I was yanked through the splintered wall of the pigsty and thrown on the ground, weeping in a heap. I spat out the foul charcoal and reached out for my journal as 2 guards magically hogtied me with chains before dragging me away. The journal had fallen upon its side, visible to me as I was pulled off, writhing and screaming through tears to be reunited with her. The picture I had so desperately tried to finish stared directly back at me, tugging at my heart and stirring emotions long dead. My mother, once again being forced to watch me being taken from her. I had envisioned a bustling market of slaves in an enclosure under the watchful eye of guards and slave masters. What I saw was entirely different. Set among the waiting room where passengers in the past would have sat to await their Pegasi transports, the slave enclosure had few boundaries and a lot of slaves simply lying on the floor. What envy I had for them having 4 walls and a solid roof quickly evaporated as I witnessed the bare stones they had to sleep on in here. At least the fun farm petting zoo had dirt. The ponies looked like they were sore on one side, presumably from lying on the hard surface for so long each night. The old areas where seating cushions might have sat were long gone, leaving only sharp metal fixtures in their place. Rows of chairs littered the floor, punctuated by empty rigs on the ceiling that may once have held flight times. The displays had been removed. I'd seen them once in a factory and used for shift work instead. One remained, however, broken and shattered in the middle of the great hall, where it had fallen long ago. Around the edge of the walls were shop fronts, their windows and walls blown in or stripped out for Master Red-Eye's industry. Gift stores, arcane technology and food outlets were visible by their symbols, but these days they held something else. In those broken shops lurked what I searched for. 3 of them were on this side of the waiting room. Through some arches I could see a few more, one boarded up and the other 2 bearing another couple of merchants. At the back of the room was a set of steel escalators that led to a sky deck. That would have been the place I'd seen from the outside, with enormous windows overviewing the runways and, presumably, leading further into the facility. The slave market was definitely not how I had imagined it. There was a stillness. It occurred to me that the crowded rush I had expected was born only of my brief time hearing about Ten Pony Tower in the past. Here, slaves simply had nothing to trade except in rare cases. I could see the traders lying down like any other slave next to their wares. I wondered how they didn't have it all stolen when they were called for a work shift. Perhaps they were all pretty dangerous and beat anyone who dared take goods. There were about 6 of them. Most didn't seem to specialize, simply having whatever they could scavenge instead. I didn't imagine any valuable goods would be on display where the slavers could see and confiscate them. 5 of them followed this pattern, rough-looking slaves with more rags than the others, patched into warmer and tougher clothing to protect themselves. They seemed better fed too. 3 mares and 2 bucks made up their numbers, and there seemed to be at least 1 guard nearby to each shop as well, also a slave. Red-Eye's guards were beside me at the entrance, clearly more for a presence inside than any real purpose. A 6th merchant caught my eye. A unicorn with an old saddlebag bearing the image of 3 butterflies in a yellow and pink pattern. I knew that design. I'd seen it before in the bathroom of the home I'd been forced to search years ago. It meant medicine. Even my journal could wait, if it meant I got to see if the unicorn could get me something. Or better yet, heal me. I trotted as fast as I dared on my now wobbly legs through the arches into the second half of the waiting room. Dejected ponies lay on the ground around me, watching me with hazy and hopeless eyes as I moved towards the healer. Many moved away from me, hobbling lazily, dragging themselves over the ground on weary legs. At first, I presumed this was due to my sick appearance, but after a quick sniff, it was probably due to the fact I was still reeking of drainage. Well, bartering was going to be fun while smelling like a latrine. All the same, the slaves backing away from me only served to remind me I was in dangerous territory here. Slaves were opportunistic. If any of them thought of a reason to bring me down, they would. I was alone. No pony was waiting in the wings to save me now. Fear bit at my mind and gnawed at my determination to achieve my aims and get my journal back. Was it worth risking dying for a few scraps of paper I never even really looked at? The unicorn healer seemed to regard me with some distaste as I approached, his eyes following my clearly sick self right up to looking down his own nose at me past a small set of glasses. His cutie mark didn't fill me with great confidence. A bone saw.
I heard you can get healing here.
I hardly even knew what to ask for.
Could I be healed?
Fairly basic, but what else could I ask for? I clearly didn't know exactly what was wrong with me, and if I started listing everything, we'd be here till the end of time. The healer snorted, spitting to the side and moving around me as his horn flared into being.
"Checkup is free, shrimp,"
he began muttering as his glowing horn flickered to and fro across my body.
"But the healing costs. What you got to trade?"
I sighed, my head drooping. Just typical. Healing equipment away from assigned medical facilities would be rare and valuable to slaves, but healing magic was hardly a finite resource to a unicorn. Yet he still charged? That just wasn't fair. As he trotted around to look me in the eye and cock his head, awaiting the offer, I could only lower my head again and shake it.
"So, just another sick little slave who thinks I give out everything for free, just because I'm medically trained. What did you honestly expect? It's a buyer's market among slaves these days. Only reason I'm not drafted to heal his army is because I've got no stamina for this at all. I can only do 1 pony a day with magic and still have enough left in me to work my shift."
He eyed me up, eyebrows narrowing.
"And here you think I'm going to waste that on you?"
Please, isn't there anything?
I couldn't hide the shaking fear in my voice as I was forced to admit the truth.
I think I'm dying, sir. Please.
"You certainly are."
My heart skipped a beat. I'd had theories, but to hear it straight from him was chilling. I felt my eyes beginning to well up as I stared at the healer. He just tossed his mane and sighed, turning away to his inventory in a bag. I could see little orange packs and small bottles of sloshing liquid alongside a few syringes. Why did the slavers allow this? For a second, my heart leapt, until he simply sat on them instead of fetching anything, crossed his hoofs, and fixed me with a stare through his glasses.
You have an irradiated lung infection on top of some pretty severe radiation poisoning, kid. Throw on top of that a minor taint mutation. That explains the ear. And a high level of toxin in your general respiratory systems from Philly's oh-so-lovely smog. Not so uncommon around here. I get about a dozen or so a week who want healing without anything to trade. For you, well, the taint isn't curable, that's a given. But the radiation poisoning and the rest? It'd take about 5 radaways and a few healing potions. What a charge of magic to save your life. As you might imagine, I'm not about to give them away for free. You can wander off and die in your sleep like all the rest who want handouts.
I felt my hoofs going weak. I had to lie down to avoid collapsing.
A pony in good health might survive a week or so with all this. But you've got multiple barely healed lacerations, bruises everywhere, acute rat sores on your leg and face, a sprained front leg and bruised ribs. Couldn't see how many. That jerkin got in the way of checking. With all that, I'd say you've got perhaps a few days' time out there in the smog. Hell, you might drop off any night at this rate.
I was trembling, wet dots appearing on the ground in front of me. My raspy breathing led to a few coughs as I attempted to keep in my emotions. I was dying. There it was, right there. The confirmation that my time was up. I could barely believe it. Yesterday morning I was ready to accept this happening any day. But now, after being shown what was truly possible with life, I didn't want it to happen. In its own way, this was worse than the pit. At least there I could have tried to run away or tried fighting back. It wouldn't have saved me, but that feeling of resistance was a small, if important, comfort. But sickness? I couldn't get around that.
Please!
I was whining, but I could barely help it.
You must want something. I'll do anything.
I reached my hoofs forward to his, only for him to pull them back in disgust and scowl.
Get off, you irradiated little shit!
He screamed, moving away from me and zipping his bag closed. He made to turn away before stopping and looking back, a different glow in his eyes as he looked up.
Actually, anything you say?
I didn't like his tone, not one bit, but I still nodded.
Well, how'd you like to earn your healing?
I hardly had a choice. I nodded again. The cart's harness was already giving me a nasty burn on my back where I bore the brunt of the weight when I pulled. Wicked Slit had set me right to my oh-so-favorite activity in her factory. Cart delivery. Weighing what felt like half a ton of per cart, the exhaustion factor didn't so much creep in as slam home. 5 deliveries throughout the day. 1 to each of the ammo mills in Philadelphia carrying various types of metal for even more varied types of rounds manufactured to feed Red Eye's army. Copper to the Iron Shot foundry. Steel to the Saddle Sore manufacturing facility. The others I didn't even know the names of. I just put down my head and got on with pulling weights far too large for my somewhat less than stellar levels of strength. It still didn't matter. These were the last 5 carts ever to be pulled by Murky number 7. I'd see to that. Plus, I had a little plan. Wicked Slit believed me broken in and too cowardly to try anything. It was why she sometimes left me unsupervised or without a handler to better serve her efficiency ratios elsewhere. As such, I'd been able to dump my saddlebag at the side of the factory by the road and use it as a dead drop location. Each trip I made, I had stopped my cart, slipped free of my harness — the builders clearly didn't factor in ponies of my size when they designed it — and shoved a slab of flat metal into it. 5 trips. 5 sheets of different types of metal. I knew nothing of the composition of metal, so I hoped they would each do the job. I tucked the empty cart into Slit's factory, limp-hoofed and gasping for air in the sweltering air of machinery and industry. The drop-off zone was heavily guarded by slavers who directed me into a port to store the cart for some poor pony on the next shift. It had almost become a tradition, actually, for them to take bets on how long it took me to back a heavy cart into a bay with my pathetic levels of strength. The current longest time, I believed, was 6 minutes after a day I'd been overloaded. My record was 2 minutes. Rather embarrassing, really, but that was all I could do after a full shift of pulling those damn carts and having jelly legs and most of my back muscles feeling stretched out by the end of it. I heard, rather than saw, the guards bickering over amounts. It was never much. None of them liked betting more than a few caps or a couple of cigarettes on me. Sighing, I once again played their game. In theory, I would just dump the cart, but I had to judge every time which slaver was most likely to beat me up for not having him win, then try again and aim for their timing. They hadn't worked out yet that I could hear their whispering rather clearly. I let my ears do the thinking, hearing a couple bet high, citing my time in the pit and sickness to slow me down. A third voice, a buck, commented on his bet he'd made in advance, as well as the annoyance levels if I didn't do it under 3 minutes. Well, crap. I tried my best. I really did. But my aching muscles, barely healed injuries, and low energy levels just wouldn't make the cart move at all. With a slip and a surprised shout, I fell to the floor while straining to push the cart on its rusty wheels.
Oh, for the love of... Get a move on, you whelp!
30 seconds or you're getting it, Murk. I got a full pack on you.
Get it in less than 30 seconds and I'll get you for it.
My muscles just wouldn't give. I couldn't risk forcing them further. I had to retrain enough energy for tonight, what little I'd have left. I sighed, falling over and tilting my head against the cart. Some days you just couldn't win.
Oh, are you kidding me? He's giving up! Come here!
I looked up, breathing deeply and simply hoping to myself that the beating wouldn't be too bad.
Hey! What did I tell you bastards about interrupting slaves?
The trio stopped dead in their tracks. 2 of them even made to leave immediately. The third, who had advanced on me, turned, immediately sweating. Wicked Slit was stomping her way towards us all across the delivery room floor out of the manufacturing areas. She had old Pegasus flight goggles on to protect her eyes from foundry sparks, her knife floating obediently beside her. I felt envious of her stamina to keep magic up like that all day.
You beat them, they work less. Beat them when they aren't in work hours. You think you can afford to lose me 10 minutes of labor every damn time you feel like smacking something? Go hit up a slave in their pen when your shift is done!
Of course. Even slavers had shifts, albeit shorter and less laborious than the slaves. I couldn't imagine Slit would be any happier about losing her slaves than her slavers from their workplace.
Yes, ma'am. Right away, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am.
They scurried away, leaving me to get back on my hoofs and with great effort, shove the creaking cart back into the bay. An 18-inch curved knife on a sadistic slaver mistress has that sort of incentive effect on even weak ponies like me. I collapsed against it, breathing hard as I felt the 5 or 6 miles of pulling take a toll on my stamina. My front right hoof was aching, a dull, pulsating pain making itself known every couple of seconds while every muscle in my torso hurt to move. It was a familiar pain. I had endured it after every shift under Slit for the past month. I tried to take a few breaths, get to my hoofs, but my lungs reminded me they were yet uncared for by medicine, causing me to hack and cough for a good few seconds, even as I heard the rough tread of Slit nearing me. Clearly, the medical potions from yesterday were beginning to lose the temporary relief they had granted me. Judging by the pain in my throat and the swimming of my vision, I figured I had till tomorrow morning before the sickness kicked in again.
Guess it's up to me to unharness you, stupid morons!
Slit was muttering to herself as she reached out with her magic, unlatching the harness from my body. Clearly she hadn't clocked that I could simply slip out myself. Dragging my tired body across the floor with slow, deliberate, and labored movements, I collapsed just beside her. I couldn't help it. The tiredness went to my brain, A night lacking any sleep and only a small portion of foul oatmeal to power me just drained my energy reserves completely. With a snort, Slit roughly knocked me with her front hoof a few times.
Get up, Murk! You've still got 4 minutes of shift time left. Make yourself useful and carry that bag of scrap into the factory before you go. I'll show you where.
Was my well-thought-out and dictated reply.
Shut up! Get up and hurry up!
Her half-buck gave me enough reason to find some strength deep down to dodge the flying hoof and clamber to my own 4 legs to nod quickly. My eyes were hazy. I just wanted to lie down somewhere and sleep. Maybe a massage to my aching muscles. Would a bit of food go amiss? Proper food? With a sigh, I stretched out and trotted over to the sack Slit was motioning to with her knife. Biting the neck of the bag, I didn't even bother throwing it over my back, but rather just began dragging it. Rolling her eyes, Slit merely turned and cantered into the factory.
Celestia, help me from hopeless slaves!
She muttered.
I banish them all to the fucking moon where they can't bother me anymore.
I had to bite my tongue. The urge to quip something off at her as a last action before I never saw her again was so strong. Thankfully, I allowed the slave in my mind to take control for a few seconds to remain alive. I followed her, dragging the sack a foot at a time, the heavy leather tasting disgusting in my mouth from old dust and grime across it. Pull. Step back a few feet. Pull. Step back. Inside the factory, the heat hit me like a running into a wall. The massive metal vats radiated warmth so strong that mere proximity was enough to dull the senses and make a prickle on my skin. Metal shards stuck out of the back where they had pierced the lining, their scraping sound not helping on top of the mass of noise within the factory. My ears ached, almost missing Slit's sudden command to stop before walking right into her rump. With a sigh of relief, I dumped the sack where her knife tapped the ground before kneeling down again. One of the shards fell out. While Slit was still glancing at the industrial presses to observe the slaves, I quickly shoved one down my vest. I had an idea for it, courtesy of a radio-born inspiration.
Shift's over, Murk. Get out of here. I hear Whiplash has some more work for you over at the threshing mills. They need a small pony over there. Go straight there. But no buts, Murk.
She spat.
So get yours over to the damned mill before I ensure you can't sit down again for a long time.
She removed her goggles, sitting them on the bottom of the stairs that led to her office so she could pull my face up to her eyes.
I don't think I need to explain to you how much I do not like you, Murk.
The knife gently seemed to caress my forehead, the tip dragging my lanky mane from my eyes for her to see clearly.
So I'm going to tell you this.
She continued, her voice so low I began to worry she knew about my hearing.
I don't want you back. I know that chain link shackles is coming for you. The master will not be so forgiving as I have been. He isn't like me, Murk. He won't threaten you. He won't scare you with imagination or promise implausible things.
She had my attention, not from the knife that rested between my eyes from above, nor the hard hoof holding my chin up to her face. It was her tone. She spoke almost with reverence, as though she wished she never had to meet him. The master even made her terrified with his reputation among the slavers. My eyes were wide.
He breaks slaves, Murk. As far as I'm concerned, I'm glad you're going there. Perhaps you'll learn something about why you should have tried harder in life. My little slave, so woefully pathetic. You never tried, Murk. You think I can't see your destiny? Look at that tiny flank of yours. A set of shackles? I sometimes wish I could just clothe them around your hoofs and leave you out to die because you are so fucking useless to me. Born into slavery and you still can't hack it.
Her hoof roughly shoved me away.
I fell on my side, shivering as I pulled my hooves in.
Get out of here! The pit was too good for you!
I shakily got up, nodding my head. No, she was wrong. I wasn't going to go to the master. I was going to escape. I stared at Slit, looking her right in the eyes. I wanted to tell her so she would know by tomorrow that she was wrong. If Slit saw my defiance, she didn't make a sign, instead turning to scream at some slaves for stopping as they fought for breath from the heat. I wanted to whisper something, to shout something. Just one last word that proved I wasn't going to be beaten by her cruelty anymore. I couldn't think of anything. I never was good with words. She scared the slave in me too much to dare speak out against my masters. So I stole her goggles instead. I took great pleasure in her scream of frustration as I hightailed it from the factory at top speed towards the threshing mills, collecting my saddlebag as I went to add my new acquirements to it.
Now there's one unfortunate truth about the Wasteland, children. I always tell you, I bring you the truth, no matter how bad it hurts, and that is exactly my point. If you go into the Wasteland, it will hurt you. Physically, mentally, hell, even spiritually for those of you who believe. So make sure you have those potions handy. As much Radaway and Radax as you can get your hoofs on, too. Keep some bandages if you can. They're light and you never know. You can't rely on just potions. Now, a gun or a nail board may be an obvious way to experience the pain of the Wasteland. But let me remind you that we are all dirty. Yes, children, it's true. We scrounge around in the dirt scavenging all day or go out in weather no pony has business being in. So remember, disease and illness is the greatest killer. Wrap up. Keep yourself as warm as you can and dress appropriately. Take the advice from Daddy Pony, children. You do not want to get sick in the Wasteland if you can help it.
Curves became shapes. Raiders. The scourge of the Wasteland. Gangs were bad. They took over areas, attacked other ponies, killed merchants, stole goods, and generally made life a misery. Keen to be better and bigger, they'd made examples of those who crossed them and attempted to wrest control of areas from civilized ponies. But raiders? They were beyond sanity. Savage, ruthless, and powered by a drive to simply ruin the lives of every pony they met. They sought nothing more than just enough to see them through the next day. They had no mercy, little things you could bargain with, and did not hesitate to take what they wanted. I had once been in a caravan attacked by a small band of them between slave camps. The guards had fought them off, but only at terrible cost. Raiders had slaughtered my master's mistress, not even waiting till the firefight was done to explode her body with a grenade. They were living symbols of freedom taken in the wrong direction. Their sick dreams had been realized by the lawlessness of the wastes, able to act out mentalities that had no place in pony society. Those that had fallen to insanity or to realizing that no pony was there to stop them. Now I was meeting them. The master dragged me through the mall's corridors before emerging into the main hall. I had seen factories before and their cavern-like interiors, but something about the high-glass skylight, how had it survived, and curved surfaces designed to please struck me. They had been ruined, worn away and replaced by crude imitations and flagboard, surrounded by bars of metal and wire to hold together guard posts overlooking the shopping area, but they still held a timeless strength. The layout was, simply, impressive. A giant balcony with no railings. Why?
lay before the master and fell away 20 feet below into an area closed off by heavy scrap walls. 2 levels of shops made up the outer edges, reachable by stairwells at either side near the back. Along each wall were repurposed small shops, each custom designed to have a cage wall and door across the front for containment of slaves in smaller groups. Right now, they all lay open, allowing slaves to wander among a common area around an old fountain still filled, somehow with water, tepid and dark as it was. It was a shopping plaza, open and long, turned into a prison. I tried to discern the old style, but the smooth rock design was so worn that I gave up a creamish if you screwed up your eyes and pretended really hard. Rotten banners hung on all sides, bearing 6 mares of various colors, 2 of each type of pony. I recognized the yellow and pink Pegasus from the poster and the lost saddlebags as she smiled an impossibly peaceful and honestly quite relaxing message of love to all looking upon here. There was also a... Oh no. Oh please no. She was here too? Pinky! Even now her banner fluttered in a draft to turn and look at me briefly. I had to cut my own temptation to mutter under my breath for her to leave me alone just for once. The pony was as maddeningly whimsical as ever, hanging upside down on her own banner. Slogans embellished on the fabric were a mystery to me. Probably advertisements for the damn fun farm. I felt a weight release as magic gripped my shackles, unlocking and pulling them from me along with the collar. I shook, groaning as sore muscles gave their offended verdict at the unwanted movement. The master's cronies trotted away from us into the irregular ranks of slavers who looked, if anything, like smaller and less imposing versions of the master. His personal group, no doubt. The master chatted to his slavers briefly, informing them of some fun that had to remain a surprise. No doubt code to not let this slip to Prodigy. Briefly I wondered what Pinky would think of this type of surprise fun. The broadcasts in the fun farm mentioned it often enough. Blowing about in the draft, where was it even coming from? The banner of her briefly fluttered out of sight.
Raiders of the Mall!
The master's voice bellowed around the huge area of the mall. It must have housed almost 100 slaves with the amount of shops in the market area the cages were set into.
Get out here! Get out where I can see your filthy hides!
There was a commotion down below. I heard swearing and muttering before they emerged. They came slowly at first, emerging from the ground floor in 1s and 2s. Groups followed before the upper floor began to fill too. There were dozens of them. I counted at least 30 raiders as my heart began to beat far faster than it had any right to. Yet I didn't properly sweat with terror until I actually looked at them. Terrifying, foul, wretched, mangy hides covered in scars and disgusting piercings. Some had scrap shoved through their flesh, others had bones. I prayed they were not from ponies, but they looked all too like to be just that. Dyed and braided manes fell in greasy clumps around faces filled with the hate of the wasteland. Some looked so savage they barely seemed sane, snarling and howling up at even my small head poking over the edge. I saw 2 bump into each other before launching immediately into a snapping and brutal fight. Even the saner ones seemed to lick their lips with some sickened mentality as they angrily saw what had disturbed them from their rest. Or whatever else they were doing. Blood streaked the floors in places to give indications of past involvements and brawls. I saw non-raiders cowering at the back, presumably only alive due to the presence of the guards. There were far more of them than the raiders, however they clearly lived in terror of them. Despite that, they seemed unharmed. But then, none of them were Pegasi. Many raiders wore ruined pieces of torn cloth and barding. Some had face masks or wrapped scarves around their head. As they clumped together, their noise increased, as though in a greater mass they fed off of one another's energy to act up and cause commotion.
Raiders!
The master shouted down to them, prompting them to scream back a mass of insults that he only smiled at.
You have shown great fury in your work in this last stable. The Dwellers stood no chance against your frenzied assault.
A huge chorus of screaming and bellowing emerged from the raiders. Some brandished trophies. I saw one with a thread of ears around his neck. Suddenly my own mismatched and tainted ears felt a lot less repulsive, and more like a prize.
As such,
they began to quieten down.
I've brought you a gift for your entertainment.
Their stomping and howling returned, even louder than before as they saw my scarred face. 30 or more raiders all glared at me with enough lust and sick wanting to make me shrink back from their horrid laughter. I could hear them begin to call for me to be sent down for another toy. It dawned that I was not the first. The master held up a hoof. He clearly controlled them like this, offering sick rewards in return for owning a powerful workforce of brutal raiders adept at slaughtering anything in their path.
And it's a Pegasus!
A deafening explosion of screams, cheering howls, and curses swamped up and around the entire area. Even as I winced, I felt the master's unicorns telekinetically shove me forward onto the balcony before the master, my whole body on show to the raiders. Suddenly I felt very exposed. Like an announcer, one hoof holding me in place, the master crowed to them as though teasing a new item for sale.
You want him?
Yes!
You want him?
Yes!
Have him!
I quickly turned to face the master, kneeling, placing my head to his hoofs. I hadn't even noticed my instinctual tears anymore. I couldn't go down there. The thought of all the things they might do to me.
Please, master. Please. I'll do anything.
He looked down at me, wearing that malicious grin only he could pull off.
Really, number 7?
Yes!
I screamed.
Anything!
I trotted back from him, shaking my head.
No, please!
I already promised them their prize, 7. Ha! Enjoy!
He twisted, turning, and bucked me hard enough to catapult me off the balcony. A horrible explosion of pain along my side gave way to an oddly calm and pregnant moment of terror as I felt weightless. Briefly, I wished that I could only open my wings and fly away from all this. I tried, but they just didn't move. Instead, I hugged myself as tightly as I could, praying the fall would kill me. In that oddly long moment while tumbling, I wished to the goddesses. Please, make it quick. They did not smile upon me. I landed in the fountain. I didn't even have time to scream after I felt my front right shoulder strike the marble wall when I plowed into the surprisingly deep water. All sound deadened as the harsh slap of the surface knocked me senseless. My shoulder was racked with pain. I wanted to cry out, but my mouth only filled with disgusting and filthy water. Alone in the brief quiet of the dark water, I didn't even know which way was up. I realized I couldn't swim. Not that I needed to. Masses of hoofs reached in. I felt mouth biting, hoofs wrapping around me, and a huge strength pulling me out. The muffled silence of the water ended as my head broke the surface, gasping for air and trying to cry out at the same time as I saw dozens of frantic and frenzied raiders grabbing hold of every part of me they could to pull me out. I pleaded with them. They only laughed. Hurling me over the side, my shoulder rattled off the ground. It felt loose, like my leg wasn't entirely in its socket. I dislocated it. They were fighting each other over me. I saw snarling bites and bucks as scarred and pierced ponies of foul appearance and savage looks clawed at me with their hooves. Despite my protests, I was pulled to my hooves and shoved around between them, much to their amusement. Efforts to keep my shoulder protected were pointless, as was struck again and again, the loose joint sickeningly moving around the socket. One bit my ear until he fell away from the crowd pushing him. I felt hoofs bash my wings, knocking me to and fro. Unicorn magic lifted me up, the raiders leaping after me as the unicorn tried to bring me to him. My senses spun. The crush of bodies, the stench of blood and filth, and the sound of them braying reminded that their argument was my only reason to be alive. It wouldn't last long. A larger earth pony dove up, grabbing one of my wings in his teeth to drag me back down. Bucking another raider unconscious, he dragged me to a clearer area beside the fountain as the raiders prowled in a circle, ready to try and get the prize back.
I got him! I got him! It's my choice! Back off, you fucks!
His hoofs pinned me to the ground. I heard the others cease their arguments to instead shout at him what they each wanted. I heard many things. Some called to bash my head off the marble until it broke. Others wanted my teeth. One screamed to break my legs. 1/4 there already. And was shouted down as boring. But I whimpered and whinnied as I heard the overwhelmingly popular voice.
Rip his wings off!
The earth pony brayed into the air, stomping with a hoof on my head to hold me down. Without hesitation or anything like nooses or lemons posturing or taunts, he simply reached down and grabbed my right wing in his teeth before pulling sharply upwards with all his might. Before my eyes instinctively clenched shut, I saw the master far above, standing with that grin. My wings stretched, underdeveloped muscle and broken bone structure bending, and being yanked out of place as it extended this far for the first time since I was a colt. A sudden release of tension slapped it back to my side as I felt something pull free. Daring to open my eyes, I saw a few feathers in his mouth. Spitting them out, the crowd fought over them. A sickening sense of loss prompted a muffled and strangled cry from me. He reached down again, grabbing the stem itself tightly in his teeth, determined to get the full thing this time. With an almighty yank, it began. The pain was unbearable. My head thrashed, my hoofs kicked, but they held me down, chanting,
Pull it off! Pull it off! Pull it off!
I felt the muscles stretching. They weren't listening to me.
Pull it off! Pull it off! Pull it off!
My entire torso felt ready to rip off with it. Oh, goddesses, please!
Pull it off! Pull it off! Pull it off! Pull it off!
Every bit of tension disappeared at once with a snap, and I felt my torso fall to the ground again. Time was crawling as I opened my eyes. I saw blood. I turned. My wing was intact. The sound had come from above me. In the 1/4 second of realization since the noise, I saw my tormentor's face deformed around a colossal hoof driven by immeasurable force. The flow of time returned, as did number 6. Driven by a gallop and dive over the fountain, his momentum carried him into the raiders like a dark crimson cannonball he had landed amongst them. The raider atop me fell, utterly lifeless as a massive stallion carried past and thundered into their ranks with a bone-crushing sound of harsh impact. 6 raiders alone were crushed under his sheer size and huge bony hoofs powering on through the crowd. Flung aside like skittles, they rolled on the ground holding wretched limbs and battered ribs. But the rest were not cowardly pit guards. They swarmed, pressing their sheer numbers in a frenzied countercharge. The stallion whirled on the spot, teeth clenched as he bucked, swung, and threw his weight around with wild abandon. Raiders fell, receiving sickening stamps to their chest as they lay. I saw him grab one by their leather jerkin in his teeth and spin him so hard he actually threw him with his mouth across the room into another two that had been trying to catch him from behind. Their great mass broken, number 6 went to work on the individuals. A dull thud sounded as his forehead collided with a unicorn, horn or not, putting him unconscious on the spot. A full buck sent another flying into the cage door used to access this area via normal means. It bent. 3 raiders galloped and leapt, landing on his back or dragging his sides. I saw him snarl as one bit into the back of his neck before he reared up and allowed himself to fall backward. The screaming raider, unable to let go, found himself crushed under the entirety of 6's considerable weight. The other 2 ran across, hurling rocks with magic, making him back off to cover his face before charging them. Shocked by the speed of such a huge pony, they were caught and brutally disabled as he reared up and lashed his front hoofs out to slam their heads together. The sound was like 2 stones colliding. The remainder of the group, well over half of the raiders, swarmed. Number 6 growled, turning to face them, standing between them and myself. A gunshot rang out from above. Groaning as the adrenaline faded and the pain began to return from my reverie watching the massive stallion at work, I saw the master spit a rifle back to a subordinate.
Enough! I give you lot a prize and all you do is fight over it like cowards. Get in back your damn cages before you put us out of work for a month, you wretches!
The raiders hesitated. They glared at number 6, pounding the ground with their hoofs and snarling. He matched them, his own hoof pounds drowning the rest of them out.
I said enough!
The raiders began to reluctantly disperse, one by one in the same fashion as they had arrived, only now with furious disappointment in their bloodshot and yellowed eyes. On the floor lay half a dozen raiders that needed dragging off. Some just were not conscious at all. I had a nasty feeling the one on top of me had been killed instantly. Gradually they cleared the floor, others and the pony over me. Number 6 simply watched them, snorting at any got too close to us. Robbed of their fight, the raiders threw insults in their wake.
Keep him for yourself then!
What are you trying to do? Get a little family, eh?
Can't hide our prizes from us forever, traitor. Just you wait, betraying bastard!
Number 6 did not even reply. After they had gone, he cast a glance upward. I saw the 2 largest, strongest, and most terrifying ponies I knew in all of Equestria lock eyes. Even from here, not knowing much about either of them, I could see every ounce of visceral violence between them. With a snort, the master departed, moving out of sight, his fun spoiled. Without a word, I saw number 6 turn and stare directly at me. In the odd silence, despite the master leaving, I did not feel particularly safe. Not with a colossal pony I had witnessed take on an entire gang of raiders and win, moving towards me. Immobile and lying down, my perspective of him was all the worse to look at. Frightening tribal dyed hair on his coat mixed with lavish scars of gunshots, blade wounds, and everything else across his almost grotesquely powerful body. I couldn't help but look at the flapping bit of skin remaining on his left ear. Those mismatching, one-half bloodshot eyes stared down at me as though contemplating something. He pulled the dead raider from me, dumping him at the side before leaning down. I closed my eyes, squeaking loudly in fear as he came closer, and lifted me onto his back. Groaning in pain from my shoulder, even through my fear and abject disbelief, I felt myself slung over him, higher than I had ever stood, as he turned and began to trot back the way he had come towards the shop's open cage door. After much wailing and cursed comments of how much of a fool I was, I eventually learned more as he went about his business. Weathervane, despite his somewhat abrasive manner, had taken to clinging to his principles to help him stay sane across the centuries. The result seemed to be some pony who was more determined to heal others than was generally socially accepted. An odd combination, to say the least. It was also why he had started working for Red Eye. Weathervane had lived in Philadelphia, or at least had originated here before the war. This basement was his personal research and chem lab for the hospital he had actually founded and run above. Very quickly, the haphazard artistic design made sense as I learned more about Weathervane's insistence of efficient quality over aesthetic requirement. Even now, 200 years after the apocalypse, he had remained at his post. No matter who ran the city, he still ran the hospital he had built, teaching new generations to staff it himself. I simply could not put properly in words how in awe I was of that sort of determination. Part of me was tempted to ask him about before, but I sensed it might be a sore spot and I knew how badly I reacted to stories of the past anyway. Perhaps it would be best to just stay quiet on this one and treat him as an individual of the present rather than a relic of the past. While checking me over, his horn had flared as he spoke. My shoulder's pain had numbed and eventually faded before he strapped a tight wrap around it. Bruises and cuts I didn't even know I had disappeared as I was fed a stale-tasting healing potion. He seemed greatly interested in my wings, however, tutting and shaking his head.
Some pony really did a bloody number on you, kid. Would I be right in guessing blunt trauma?
I think I must have twitched as the unpleasant memory of being dragged into an old barn by fellow slaves resurfaced. Eyes clenched closed and fighting not to have a minor breakdown, I nodded. Dr. Weathervane's tone had softened after his scathing anger. Indeed, he only frequently cursed now. For him, that was a step down.
Old injury too, but that will have to wait. I'll perhaps be able to give you some more information or treatment or some shit to get rid of the pain at least later on. Need to dig out my old books. But for now, we have something a bit more important to discuss.
Setting some red away beside me, he motioned to drink up, whilst he moved backwards and settled against the counter. I could hear Brimstone still stomping around, becoming aggravated as he hunted for rat perch in the back of the room.
Well, Murky number 7.
Weathervane's voice rasped and echoed from the halls to give it a somewhat fading, slimy quality. He brought a pair of reading glasses to his face as he gave me the look that told me I should be sitting down.
I'm afraid I do not have very good news for you.
I'd known I was screwed long ago, but something about hearing it from a qualified medical professional really rammed it home.
What you have isn't a simple infected lung that got a little ratted up. What you have is something we call a pulmonary embolism. A clinically severe affliction that provides the symptoms you have demonstrated. Basically, the arteries. Do you know what they are?
I shook my head. To tell the truth, he had lost me at pulmonary. Weatherweave shook his head, tapping it and cursing lowly before continuing.
This isn't technically right, but something in your lungs is clogged up by an unspecified substance. In this case, it's your birth defect. Your ears show signs of taint mutation. Were you ever exposed?
My mother was exposed while still pregnant.
Makes sense. You were exposed to taint as a fetus and thus were born with minor abnormalities. At first I thought it was the chemicals in the air that might have started it. But on closer medical observation, it seems your ears are not the extent of your tainted afflictions from the womb. Your lungs have mostly harmless but noticeable warped sections. Now, this was never enough to really cause you trouble, until you came to Philadelphia. The ambient radiation probably aggravated it, causing the tainted inner flesh to react, inflame,
and begin to cause much more problems around your respiratory system. The more radiation you took in, the worse it got. Right now, it's just a big angry fucking blob of irradiated flesh mutated out of your primary lung systems. Symptoms are just as you say you experienced. Shortness of breath, burning lungs, nausea, retching up blood, and immobilizing periods of coughing. Untreated, this will likely kill you within days. You already know that Radaway can stall or slow the process, but...
Even Brimstone had stopped to stand, almost respectfully nearby. He looked at me with impassive eyes as I lay on my front on the bed, slowly sniffling. I couldn't even work up the energy to properly cry as I heard it all laid out bare. Then he dropped the bombshell.
I'm sorry, Murk. The taint is not curable.
That did it. I felt my breathing heighten as my chest rapidly moved from hyperventilation, before I finally felt my tear ducts let it all out. Curled up on the bed, holding my head in my hoofs, I just shook and cried. And cried. This disease, it wasn't curable at all. Artery had lied or had never really known. I heard Weatherweave explaining it all, how taints that had been with me for so long could not be purged. About how even 10 Pony Tower's prodigious medical facilities would not be enough now. Taint just wasn't something the Wasteland was equipped to cure. If the taint were gone, he could have operated and fixed it. But with it...
The most I can offer you is that regular use of Radaway will keep it benign. However, I know how hard this might be in Philadelphia. I can give you a good amount to get you started, but I must consider my long-term patients. Murk, I must stress this. You have to avoid radiation as best you can from now on. Even with Radaway, an intense burst like the one you mentioned from the Phoenix could, and probably will, kill you without immediate action and lots of anti-radiation medication. It's a city. If you weren't here, you'd likely be able to live normally with a little care. But in this damp place...
I didn't reply. I couldn't. My forelegs were soaking damp with overflow from my eyes as I just buried my face into them, wishing it would all just stop. But he continued, to get it all over, and said rather than leave more harsh words for later. Weatherweave explained what to watch out for. I would become dizzy, tired, and very short of breath like I had while around Sooty if it was reaching critical stages. Further than that, I would go into convulsions, bring up blood, and likely fall unconscious within the hour. I'd need some pony else to save me if that happened. If not, if no pony did, I would quite literally choke to death on my own blood. The limit for ambient radiation was a few days. To avoid serious symptoms, I would have to ingest at least one Radaway every day or so to keep it at bay. He had given me 5 in the bag. In combination with Prodigy's gift, I had 8. 8 days. Perhaps a couple at most if I rationed. Less than 2 weeks. But I needed to survive 2 years if I couldn't get out. It all felt so impossible. So unfairly stacked against me. Why me? Why always me? Philadelphia was never an environment that permitted moments of peace and happiness for long. Mere minutes after finding some strength in Glimmerlight and Brimstone Blitz, the workers were to march to the front of the mall under heavy Griffin guard for relocation into a series of caged wagons. Trudging out, my back reminding me that whip injuries cared not for positive thoughts, I found the process of embarking aggressive and intimidating. Slaves were being shoved by slavers from all sides, keeping them disoriented and stumbling as they filtered through the heavy gate of the mall into the thick smog of the outside world and the city.
Many choked immediately from the nearby copper refinery blowing its foul wastes down the streets, or from the rank smells emanating from those ever-present caged pits dug down into old cellars and mines. I saw the master's cronies hurling slaves into each of the half-dozen wagons, raiders or not, with enough force to rattle them off of the far side. Those baleful gas masks gazed upon us from above on rope and scrap bridges running between gaps on neighboring buildings, weapons ready to mercilessly cut down any pony who trotted out of line. Whimpering, I stuck close to Glimmerlight as best I could while the thick mass of rank slaves and disgusting raiders crowded about us before being split toward their transports. My turn came and went about as smoothly as I could have hoped. The same slaver who had directed me to the refinery chuckled as he found me on his wagon. He tossed me to his comrade. The shoving was about as demeaning and embarrassing, my yelping may have had something to do with that, as it could be before a magical throw hurled me inside the wagon to slam on the hard straw-ridden metal floor. Curling in the corner out of sheer protective habit, the only real consolation was that Glimmerlight and Brimstone were brought into the same wagon. The guards didn't even try touching him as his huge weight caused the wagon to rock on the suspension by merely stepping inside. That and making the 4 slaves tasked to pull it groan audibly, mostly asking why he wasn't pulling. Even as the cage door was slammed shut after a dozen more slaves were crammed in, I didn't move. Nothing could help my mind worrying on all the twisted fates I was in for. Stables were legendary for how messed up they could get. I wanted to just run away. Hide. Go back to Wicked Slit and beg to be allowed to just pull carts again.
Just stay with us. We'll try and keep you safe.
Glimmerlight's voice was shaky. The harsh loading sequence and imminent stable invasion had to be affecting her as well. The mere fact she had added "try" said it all. Zombie ponies seemed little in comparison to the past that had ended the world with its horrors. Settling down, I tried to calm myself, to remind myself to breathe, just breathe and look around, to not think that of being in a cage, but rather to look around at the world, at all the ponies and buildings that I was used to in Philadelphia. Instead, I saw the master moving away from the armory wagon that carried the weapons to stand at the gateway to the mall. Seeing me looking, that grin began to crawl across his face while his head followed me on our departure. His eyes were fixed on mine the entire time, before he raised a hoof to actually wave mockingly. His voice rang out just loud enough for only myself to hear it. How did he know the volume to use?
Enjoy the history of how ponies like me came to rule your world, number 7. Just think of all the skeletons you'll get to meet.
Moments later, Glimmerlight began her efforts to understand and help me after I had collapsed into a blubbering heap at her hoofs. Perhaps, if I had been watching, I might have felt something as we passed through the main gates and outside of the hell I had been trapped in. But I was too busy trying to quell thoughts of dark voids looking to pull me underground into the past's madness. I was not alone. Without a doubt, I could feel something around here. Even as I trotted as quietly as possible, it was becoming more apparent that there was something lurking in the darkness down here. Sitting in the canteen had only been hurting me. Something about the evidence of pony life but absolutely no remains was just downright freaky. That, and I kept anticipating to look up and see faces staring in through the windows. I couldn't stay here. Not if anything knew where I was, and so I decided to keep moving. The more I looked, the higher the chances of finding stairs leading to a higher level. Up. Always up, towards the surface, towards the sky. But right now, the stable seemed intent to reveal none of its staircases. Instead, a growing fear of being locked down here forever with the drifting ghosts of the past was setting in. My mane itched and my skin crawled. Stopping in the middle of... where was I? Was the canteen back corner and down the hall? Or, wait, was it to the left or right back there? My heart was pumping hard enough to actually be dull thumping to my one good ear. Every flicker of the pip-bug threatened to illuminate some pony's eerie form in the darkness ahead of me. I spun to look behind me on every other step, quickly turning again to check the way I'd come from. I did this multiple times if I heard something, a gurgle or tapping from nearby. Sometimes I turned so often and so fast, I forgot which way I was meant to be looking in the first place. A humming picked up from above me, vibrating the entire endless corridor before wisps of white noise and static drifted down the hallways. I heard distant voices, unidentifiable and warped. Part of my mind tried to scream that it was just some poor slave activating the stable skill switch again above me, but somehow it didn't quite stick hard enough to let the fear clenching my heart unwind. A PA system loudspeaker on the wall hissed dimly as I passed, like a broken gramophone spinning. 2 steps later, it cut for no apparent reason, plunging me once again that silence. Squeaking when my hoof almost tripped over something, I cantered to the side, my pip-bug held out in one shaky hoof at a red scooter, abandoned in the hallway, tipped on its side. As rusty as the walls, it looked to have almost fallen apart on the minor impact with my pip-bug leg. Glancing around for anything else, I found nothing but a fallen bell from the scooter. Not designed for hoofs to pick up, its small size had almost fallen between 2 floor panels. Without really knowing why, I leaned down and bit it, storing it in one small leg pocket. Okay, perhaps I tried it once. Packing it away safely, I lifted my head up again. The corridor really did just go on forever. Turn after turn. The same modular 10 feet every single time. A glint in the darkness made me perk up. I might have been fearful, but anything in this world was a thankful respite. Breaking into what kind of a slow gallop I could, I aimed for it, seeing my pip-bug light reflected in a thick, murky glass. Sloshing through some low water running down the hallway and kicking aside little metal cylinders on the floor, I threw myself against the glass, staring in. What was it? A way out? It was a canteen with a dirty plate covered in red tomato sauce, sitting on a familiar table in front of me. Every muscle seemed to wither and die as I slumped against the glass, banging my head on it at the sheer fruitlessness of my efforts to make progress down in the dark. Cramped corridors and thick air muddled my perception. Had I really just spent the last, hour? Was it an hour? Oh, goddesses. Thumping my hoof on the glass, I muttered nothing to myself. I wanted a direction. I'd always had one, however vague it had become. But down here, it was just endless trotting in a state of quickly fading trust for Glimmerlight to find me. No pony had ever stuck to their word with me. Why would this be any different? I hadn't even been struck with anxiety over the dead past in here, other than my sadness at the canteen, and already I was cracking. Guess friends weren't the big helps that I'd hoped they might be. My head bumped once again on the glass. Sighing, I opened my eyes to stare inside. Maybe I could just hide under a table. There was a shape behind the counter. Every muscle and liter of blood in my entire body froze on the spot. Like in some stupid reaction to freeze and hope I wasn't spotted. I didn't even blink as fearful tears burnt my eyes. Movement not a defined form. Just occasional edges and shifting silhouettes as something moved around. Sound floated through the door around the corner that led into the canteen.
Get to the lower levels. They're down there. Put any pony who can't fight in their rooms safely. Get out the canteen, every pony. Get out! Get out! They're trying to...
It was interspersed by haste static and electronic screaming at a low volume behind the words. The shape flowed lazily back and forth, before a distinctly pony-shaped head finally turned toward me and then darted into a thicker shadow before disappearing entirely. The sounds clicked and fell silent. What the hell? Eventually, my muscles stiffly regained the power of movement. I wanted to run, to hide, but where? I could run for hours down here and just, well, who knew what I'd find? Turning, I quickly cantered inside the canteen again. If that thing left it, then at least it was the one place I knew it wasn't. But I just couldn't scrub the sight of that head turning slowly toward me from my mind. It had been featureless, just a shade in the shadows. I couldn't help it. I dived under the tables and curled into a ball. Fear stopped me from even whimpering out of a deadly thought of it returning. My eyes wouldn't close. What if I opened them and it was right there in front of me? Simply staring at the floor counters before me, the unceasing darkness hid everything not 2 feet from my head, and the utterly silent ambience, other than the occasional creepy vibration passing through, was just getting to me. The thought of the mall was like a homecoming. I wanted my pigsty with all the stupid Pinky music in the air to remind me that she was still watching me forever. I even wished, not for the first time, that I were back in Slit's factory. Even the toxic atmosphere in there was preferable to the suffocating lack of space down here. But no, I couldn't get back to them. I'd tried to trot off and just ended back here. I was just going to curl into a ball and be as unnoticeable as possible until some pony came around, hopefully before I died of hunger. Dying of hunger while laying pathetically on the floor of a canteen, dozens of feet underground in the pitch dark of a place meant to sustain ponies. Sometimes there was no end to the irony of my life. Staring for longer still, something caught my eye. On the ground was an audio recorder. I knew that hadn't been there before. Crawling out, I grabbed it. To hell with being afraid of the past. I needed sound. Something. Some source of sensory input to stop my mind becoming as enclosed as the stable around me before it drove me insane. Who knew? Perhaps they would be telling where to go. Jamming it into my pip-bug, I noticed the only remaining button was a play button. The stop button lay nearby on the ground, broken and unusable. If I started this playback, there was no stopping it. I hesitated for a few seconds before pushing it. The static pierced into my ears, echoing around off the metal walls. Squirming and yelping out loud, I clutched my ear as the recorder's volume setting spiked. Eyes watering, I tried to hold my right ear shut and protected it as best as I could until the stabbing pains went away from my head.
Right, it's running. You ready, Runner Bean? This is it. Sure thing, Scalpy. We got the weapons from the armory all here. They won't have anything, so hopefully this will be pretty easy. Just scalp in, point a few guns, get them to stop all the weapons making, right? Yeah, no blood. But we don't have a choice.
There was an unnatural pause.
The audio log can't hear you if you're not Bean. We need this stored. We need the proof for future generations in here to prove we did this right. That we didn't kill any pony. They have gone too far, taking all the damn stable apart to fix things that didn't need fixing. The PA system glitches and the draining of inordinate amounts of power that we need for hot water and lighting are just too much. They're doing something. The Overmare keeps telling us not to worry, but they wouldn't keep it secret if it weren't anything big. We have a right to know, and we need to find out. You narrate this entire thing? Context, my friend, context. People must know why we did research. This record is that future stable generations will understand. Hey, Scalpy, the others are waiting. Every pony in the top levels is heading down to their rooms below. Out of the way. We need to move, now!
Alright. I'll be in 2 seconds.
His voice became lower. Clutching the recorder closely, my ear ringing and feeling swollen inside, I glanced around me at the quiet canteen. Just what had those ministry scientists done to the stable to cause all this? How messed up were those ponies to make such technology?
One of the foals managed to creep through an air duct last week. A filly called Snowy Gust. She got into the science areas on a whim somehow. Only thing is, when they sent her back out, she couldn't remember a damn thing. Why would you need to wipe the memory of a child? That little filly would never have understood any of that stuff. They need to be stopped. I can't watch the fools I teach go through this sort of horror. You don't mess with memories. It never works. Hey, Scalpy, dude, come on!
Heard a scuffling, a click of some weapons, and the sound of Sandy Sculpt trotting.
Right. Thank you all for meeting me here so quick. They watch the atrium, but this canteen should be pretty safe till we get close enough. We don't need them locking us out.
Wait, the canteen?
Well, you're the leader, Sandy. You're the only one recording this for whatever reasons. We'll get down there and get back up as soon as we can get to the atrium to negotiate once we've made sure it's made safe. Lead on.
My heart leapt. If I just paid careful attention to their sounds, perhaps I could follow the recording by listening for turns? I needed to get out of this void black area of the stable. They could be my only hope. Overcoming my fears had to be done. I needed to do it sometime, to be able to stand up strong if I were to ever escape.
All right, every pony ready? No stopping now. It's make or break for us. Right. We're in. Let's do this. Yeah! With you. Right behind you.
Squealing, I felt myself pulled back into the hole by my hind legs. Whips lashed them. Hoofs stomped and tugged. Again and again, stuck in the hole, I screamed and begged, desperately trying to avoid being yanked through into the rowdy gang of slavers, just waiting to punish me. I wanted to go, to escape, to fly, without wings. Gritting my teeth, my thoughts firmly on her waiting for me, she had shown me the virtue of freedom, the determination you had to have. I tugged my hind legs back in and bucked for all I was worth. The sickening crunch of teeth shattering mixed with a high-pitched shriek as I felt my hind legs come free. Pushing through, I felt my heart sink as I saw them covered in lash marks that bled and weltered. Adrenaline was all I had left. Adrenaline and faith. I ran into the mill. Around me, I heard the gates being thrown or broken open. This was a one-way ticket now. I either escaped or fell to them. I could already hear some inside the facility, but there was no way for them to know I was headed up there. Bucking in a back door, I made for the emergency stairs. They'd go to the top, right? Clattering on the stone steps, I climbed flight after flight. 3 floors. 5. My stamina began to flag. Below me, I heard some of them rush into the staircase. Whimpering, I forced my body to keep plodding through step after step, thoughts of freedom racing in my mind. If I could just get on that zipline, I'd feel it. I knew it. So even as my legs turned wobbly, even as my lungs were crying out to stop, I kept pushing. They were on every level now. I could hear a voice of authority ordering them to head back down. I didn't pay attention to listen too closely. It was just good for me if they thought I was lower. Then, finally, the roof access door. It was unlocked, oh thank goddesses. Throwing it open, I almost fell through it onto the vent-ridden roof of the mill. Ahead of me, I could see the pole with the zipline on it. It was just a race to get myself tied onto it now before they got up here. Such thoughts immediately got thrown from my mind. If I had to, I'd throw myself out and just hold on for dear life rather than delay. Cantering, unable to even gallop, I staggered and meandered toward it. 30 feet. 20 feet. I could see the zipline heading off so far into the outskirts of the city, past barriers and fallen buildings. There was no way any pony could follow in time. Hoofs clattering on the stairs echoed up. From somewhere closer. Push on! Push on! A door flew open. My heart sunk as I saw it ahead of me, from the other end of the building. Wanting to scream in frustration, I was about to throw myself into a gallop until finally, my teary eyes focused on the figure.
Stop right there, Murk.
With his glinting eyepiece, floating revolver held solid and true before him, and clad in his red and black battle barding, Prodigy galloped out onto the roof, blocking my path to the zip line. He skidded to a halt, catching his breath before shouting desperately.
You've got half the slavers in the southern quadrant after you, Murk. Come with me. I'll get you back safely.
My breath was rasping and my lungs wheezing. I coughed hard as I staggered onward. I couldn't stop. I was too close. Blood fell to the ground. From my cough or wounds, I didn't know.
No!
I shrieked, expelling a life of frustration and hatred.
I can't! Please don't do this to me again! Just let me go!
Prodigy trotted to the side, blocking my approach, but his head never turned away from me.
You know I can't do that, Murk. Master Red-Eye demands...
I want to be free!
He matched every movement I made, the revolver pointed directly at me.
I can make you free, Murk. If you do this, you'll be nothing but dead meat to the wastes. Look at what happened. You aren't even out of Philadelphia and already you're almost running dead. If you take this into the wastes, I promise you, you will die.
I don't care. She made me see it. She made me.
I was crying harder than I ever had. No pride in my voice, but a horrid, rasping beg.
Just step to the side. Let me go, Prodigy. Please. You're kind. You've helped me. But just let me go.
Around us, the wind picked up, swirling a red cloud of soot-filled smoke out of the way, revealing to one side of us the red-hazed slave city in all its terrible glory, and on the other the dusty expanse of the wastes. Atop the building, at the border of my dreams, I felt my entire future hang in the balance. But he just shook his head sadly.
Freedom isn't just not being in Philadelphia, Murk. I've been trying to explain that to you. There's more to it than that. Let me help you earn it!
Slaving away isn't any way to be free. Not to me. Just to have one day, even an hour where no one is controlling me. I could die happily.
He lost his composure, raising his voice.
I don't want you to die, Murky! Master Red-Eye and I can help you, like he helped me. Murk, I know how you feel. I understand what it's like to...
I cut him off, tears streaming down my cheeks.
No! You're just another master like any other. I was born a slave. You have hundreds of others in there. I'm just one. Please, can't you let me go? Just one. Why can't you understand that?
Prodigy did not yield his position, blocking me from the zip line. It waved in the wind behind him, taunting with its proximity. Below us, I could hear the master bellowing for slavers to head back upstairs. I had to go now.
Prodigy, just please,
A gust of wind swept smog across the roof, choking me. Both our mains and clothes were whipping in the wind towards the wastes, away from Philadelphia. Prodigy tried to keep his voice measured, but the wind was forcing him to shout.
Stand down, Murk! I know you feel you have to, but I refuse to let you kill yourself on the wastes. Stick with me. I can make you free and a better pony. Master Red-Eye is trying to help the wastes and those in it. Work with me!
Are you insane?
My voice shrieked.
Look at what he's made!
I swept my injured hoof toward Philadelphia, indicating the giant factories where hundreds, perhaps thousands of slaves were now toiling and dying slowly within.
Red-Eye is a monster! I'm sick, Prodigy! I'm dying because of this city! I've been tortured, shot, beaten! The masters hurt and killed those trying to help me! I got put in a pit to die! I know you're intelligent! Why can't you see this is wrong?
Because it is! Do you think Master Red-Eye likes all this? No! But how else can the wastes be saved? You think Little Pip is going to shoot every monster there is? What about Brimstone? Would she shoot him? She is not your path in life, Murk.
Shutting my eyes, I shook my head frantically.
Stop it! She made me free! Opened my eyes! She's everything to me!
His voice broke into a desperate cry.
Damn it, Murk! I'm trying to protect you! You're hurt, not just physically, but inside! Bear it a while longer. I will show you what freedom means!
You're just lying! I can be free now! I'll manage! I have friends!
You know I'm right, Murk. I plead of you. Stand down and come with me. I can still get you back inside safely, but we must move now!
I could hear heavy tread on the staircase behind me. The master's shouts. I turned to look back, knowing he and the slavers would be here any minute.
Murk, please!
Turning back, sniffling, I looked beyond Prodigy, seeing the land of possibility. All the freedom and dreams I had wished for my entire life. Even if I hadn't realized it. One daring rush away.
I can't let you go, Murk. I cannot disobey Master Red-Eye. If you run, I will have to stop you. Don't make me do it. Don't make me, Murk, please!
The world seemed to quiet down. Every flap of the fabric over the building or our clothing became lethargic and dulled. Only the shining sunset through the distant clouds seemed clear.
You don't understand at all, Prodigy. Some pony like you never could.
Finally my tears dried, but he just shook his head.
I do, Murk. I do. Don't force it, I can help you. Put the work in. I will make you a better pony by the end of it. You can help save Equestria, but more importantly, save yourself more than going with her ever will. Let me try.
He was wrong. He had to be. A slaver could never feel what I felt. I began to gallop.
Murk, stop! Don't force me! Let me be the pony who helps you, not the slaver who stops you! I can't disobey him and let you go! I can't!
Gritting my teeth, I gunned for the zipline, arcing to go around him. I could see his revolver wavering as he screamed again for me to stop. 10 feet. 7.
Murk, don't!
5.
Murk!
4. A single gunshot rang out across the rooftop. I felt nothing, just a rocking impact that stopped me dead in my tracks a few feet from Prodigy. He was sweating hard, looking as shocked as I felt behind the fading glare of his revolver. Slowly, hesitantly and shaking, I looked down and saw the trickle of blood from the hole in my chest. It grew, spreading and staining my fleece, dripping to the floor in thick clods. No pain, but a fast numbness. I looked back up to Prodigy and felt tears drip from my eyes.
Please.
The revolver clattered to the ground. I felt him move forward, catching me as I fell to the side. Once again, the darkness began to overtake me, creeping in at the side of my vision. Ahead of me, behind me, Prodigy. I could still see the wastes beckoning to me. The open world.
Please,
His hoofs held me tightly against him. One pressed over my chest as he screamed over the edge for some pony to bring potions immediately. I could feel him shaking terribly.
I'm sorry, Murk. I want you to be free.
I felt my head limply fall into his hoofs, unconsciousness finally claiming me.
But it can't be today. I'm so sorry.